Hello, my lovelies! Welcome to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the Kid Nerd Bean, and today we're talking about one of Disney's most underrated films, Emperor's New Groove. Now, today we're not going to be talking about why it's the most underrated film or what happened that it didn't do so well. For more information on that, check out the links in the description below. No, today we're going to be talking about a hot take on an unpopular opinion that I personally have about the video, and that is that Yzma, the villain of the movie, is actually a really good role model for not just young girls, but everyone. Now, why would you ask that? How do you even come to that conclusion? How do you even decide what a good Disney character role model is? These are all great questions that are going to be answered later in the video. First, we're going to look at, or at least try to look at, Yzma as objectively as possible. Now, this is going to be difficult because there is, of course, the bias of the film being portrayed from Kuzco's point of view, and then my own additional bias of just my loving the character Yzma. But putting those two things aside, let's try and see what we actually know about her from watching the film. And before we even go down that rabbit hole, one of the things that stood out to me that made me even want to consider this video is how she handles her anger. Let's take a look at this following clip and see what she does when she finds out that she's been fired by Kuzco.
Or so I thought.
He can't get rid of me that easily. Who does that ungrateful little worm think he is? Does he, a little to the left, have any idea of who he's dealing with? How could he do this to me? Why, I practically raised him.
Yeah, you think he would have turned out better.
Yeah, go figure.
Well, it's better you're taking out your anger on these things instead of the real Kuzco, huh?
As you can see in the clip, the way she handles her anger is by smashing several stone Kuzco heads. And this is actually something that psychologists and anger management people actually recommend that you do in the real world. You find a way to take out your anger on something that isn't the actual target of said anger. So for some people, this is going to the gym and hitting a punching bag. For others, it's screaming into a pillow. And for Yzma, it's smashing Kuzco's stone head over and over and over again. And we can see that this isn't likely the first time she's done this because of how many of these things she has. So the fact that she's able to express her anger in a healthy manner and that this is portrayed to the audience is something that really got my attention, and I was like, hang on, this might be going somewhere. Now, she does eventually decide that the only way to rectify the situation is to kill Kuzco, but even then, that isn't her go-to. It isn't something that she decides to do until Kronk inadvertently plants the idea in her head. And all things aside, when you play the
Game of Thrones, you win or you die. There is no middle ground.
And talking about the Game of Thrones, let's see how she and Kuzco both play it, because this is another thing that we need to look at when deciding should Yzma be considered a good role model. And when we see the Empire in the beginning of the film, as we see Pacha leaving the city, we see that it's a booming metropolis. The Empire's doing very well, all things considered. Now, we do have the introduction to the one peasant character who is begging for food from Yzma in the beginning, and she tells them,
Ha! You really should have thought of that before you became peasants.
But, you know, political conservatism and being opposed to pre-colonial food stamps doesn't automatically make someone a villain. I'm sure people are going to disagree with that, and you can let me know in the comment section down below. But seeing how she interacts with the various people in the castle and the Empire, we see that she doesn't actually treat them all that differently from Kuzco, which makes sense as she's the person who raised him. But there are some key differences in her political choices and the way she interacts with the commoners or the servants and the guards in the castle that set her apart from Kuzco, who, apart from deciding not to build his pool house on the most important village in the Empire, doesn't really have all that much of character growth. Now, like I said, the way Yzma's been running the country for all of Kuzco's life, and likely before that, as they make a lot of jokes about her having that job for a very long time, like a really long time, we see that, you know, politically and economically, the Empire's doing well. Whereas Kuzco's first order of business on his birthday that he tells us is that he's going to demolish Pacha's village to build a pool house. Something that's only going to be accessible to him and any friends, if he had any, but as we see throughout the film, the only person he ever interacts with or considers a friend is Pacha. And now, it's not just that he wants to build a pool house that makes him a bad ruler. It's not just his selfishness. it's where he wants to put the pool house. Now, when he's interviewing Pacha to decide whether or not he wants to put his pool house there, he asks a very important question, and let's take a look at this interaction.
That's right, you are just the man I wanted to see.
I am?
Word on the street is you can fix my problem. You can fix my problem, can't you?
Sure, I'll do what I can.
Good, good, that's just what I wanted to hear. Are you aware of just how important your village is to the Empire?
Well, I know we grow the crops that you use here at the palace. We also herd the llamas that you...
In this back and forth between Pacha and Kuzco, Pacha brings up two very important facts about his village that Kuzco seems to already know or just outright disregards as unimportant. And the fact that he disregards these two things is very important to what his leadership would look like had Yzma not intervened. The first of these things, and probably the most important directly to Kuzco, is that Pacha acknowledges that his village grows all the food that goes to the palace. So, if Kuzco were to have gotten his way had Yzma not intervened, he would have demolished his sole source of nutrients. Pacha also mentions that the second most well-known thing about his village is that they herd all of the llamas. Now, for those who are unaware, Cusco's empire is supposed to be more or less placed in Peru. And one of the biggest exports of Peru is wool that is produced by llamas. So not only is Pacha's village the sole source of food for the castle, but it's also one of the biggest providers of their country's main export. So, had Yzma not tried to kill Kuzco and then accidentally turn him into a llama and send him on his journey, he would have effectively, on day one of his independent rule, trashed his country's economy and created a food crisis for the capital city. Considering this, we can actually see that Yzma's political move to remove Kuzco from the throne permanently may have been best for the country as a whole, but simply being a good ruler and getting rid of an even worse one doesn't make you a good role model in its own right. We have to look at something else that would give Yzma redeeming qualities. Something that I think really stands out about her character and sets her apart from all of the other villains, male or female, in the Disney universe is the fact that she is a scientist. Not only is she a scientist, but she's Disney's first woman in STEM. If you look at the other villains, particularly the female villains in the Disney universe, they're all either wicked stepmothers, witches, or in the case of Snow White, they're both. Yzma doesn't use magic to forward her schemes and achieve her goals. She uses science. We don't see Yzma using potions and spells to turn Kuzco into a llama or try to kill him. She goes to her not-so-secret lab, where she and Kronk find a poison, not a potion, a poison, to kill Kuzco at dinner. Now, this poison ends up being extract of llama, and then the hilarity and buddy journey that Kuzco goes through ensues into the film. But looking at this, the fact that Yzma uses science and poisons and her lab to achieve her goals shows that this film was really ahead of its time. Yzma, as Disney's first woman in STEM, came out in Emperor's New Groove in the year 2000. And not only was she Disney's first woman in STEM, she was Disney's only woman in STEM for quite some time. Disney's next female figure in STEM didn't come out until Doc McStuffins first aired on the Disney Channel, and that was in the year 2012. So for over a decade, the only role model girls had if they wanted to see a Disney woman in STEM was Yzma. Now, this isn't going to be a critique on Disney's lack of female STEM role models for women, but it is something that I wanted to make a poignant point about because it's something that really propels Yzma to the top of this should she be considered a role model theory that we're going with for the video. Now, aside from being a woman in STEM and an effective ruler, we need to have some sort of metrics to compare her against other Disney female characters to determine if she or they are good role models. And since we're talking about women in STEM, we're going to approach this scientifically. Now, in doing research to determine whether or not Yzma could be considered a good role model, I came across several articles comparing top 5 best, top 5 worst, and different ranking scales for Disney princesses and Disney female characters as to who is and isn't a good role model. And in researching these articles, I came across 3 major categories of points that these articles brought up in support of why they did or didn't think that a female character was a good role model within the Disney universe. And we're going to boil these 3 things down to agency, Is this character a protagonist? Do they drive the plot forward? Do they make their own decisions? And how much control do they have in their own life? The next category is going to be likability. Is this character liked within her own story by the other characters, and is she supposed to be liked by the audience? And the third category is going to be what positive values does this character emulate or provide for young watchers to emulate? And the way we're going to rank these is going to be on a 5-point scale. Now, for the first two categories, this is going to be pretty simple, going down that checklist of subsets that I just went through. Protagonist, do they drive the plot forward? Are they liked by the audience? Are they liked by the characters? Etc., etc. With regards to whether or not they make a good positive role model through the positive values that they project on screen, this one is going to be more holistic in not just what positive values do they emulate, but does their characters explicitly try to do so? Do they stand for something? Or are they just passively showing this through the show? And of course, we are going to be looking at, are there any negative traits that really detract from the positive in this character? These could be things like, well, obviously for Yzma, it's going to be that she's the villain. But for other characters, it could be things like, are they dangerously naive? Are they really, really selfish? Do they do things that would cause alarm in the real world? So, as we discussed, there are 3 main positive categories and 1 negative category that can detract points from the first 3. Each of these first 3 categories, agency, likability, and positive values, are all going to be on a 5-point scale. And so, the highest any one character can get is going to be 15 points. Now, for the purposes of this ranking scenario and determining whether or not just Yzma, but if any character is going to be a good role model, they're going to need to score at least 8 or higher. So an example of a character who is often listed on these types of articles as somewhat of a contentious yes she is, no she isn't, we're going to give as an example for our ranking system, and that is the Disney princess Cinderella. Now, for agency, Cinderella's going to get a 1. She gets 1 out of 5, she gets any points just simply for being the protagonist of the story. But she doesn't make any of her own choices. She doesn't make her own dress, the mice make it for her. She doesn't find a way to get to the ball. She cries and then the magic fairy godmother shows up and takes her there. Arguably the only thing that she does of her own volition is try to escape her attic lockup when the prince visits at the end of the movie, and even then she has to have the mice help her. So as far as agency goes, she's not really in charge of her own life. So for that, she gets a 1. Looking at the second category, likability, she does pretty well. We're going to give her a 4 out of 5. She is a little bit annoying, at least to me, with all the singing and the animals, but everyone who encounters her, with the exception of the villains in this story, instantly fall in love with her, and the audience is supposed to too. So for that, she gets a 4 out of 5. Now, for positive values that she projects onto the screen, she's going to be one of these more passive figures where she isn't actively trying to express these traits, they're just part of her character. And these things are going to be a kindness and optimism that she carries with her, even though her situation isn't that great in the beginning of the movie. And, you know, we're going to throw in an extra point for hard work, because even though she didn't choose her station in life, she does take her work very seriously and tries to do a good job with her chores. So looking at that and then looking at the negatives, we do see that, yes, these are things that come up in the other articles, or things like she's a total pushover, she accepts a lot of abuse and doesn't do anything about it, doesn't even complain about it, and she does, of course, to quote Frozen, marry a man she just met. Putting all this together with her overall lack of agency, she gets an overall score of 4 out of 15. So, with regards to this ranking scale, we're not considering her in the running to be a good role model for girls, or any children. Now, for the next set of Disney princesses and female characters that we're going through, they're not going to be in any particular order, except for this first one because she's one of my favorite Disney characters ever, and I want to talk about her first. And this is going to be Disney's Esmeralda from Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now, for agency, she gets a 4.5 out of 5. We take off half a point because she isn't the actual protagonist, but her actions and the impact she has on other characters drive the plot of the story. Now, the fact that her character drives the plot of the story, there is a lot of debate within the fans of the book that this isn't true to the source material, and for more information on that, Lindsay Ellis has a wonderful video on Hunchback of Notre Dame, in which you can find a link in the description down below. but we're not really going to be talking about that because we only really care about Esmeralda. So, she's very independent, makes all of her own choices, and drives the plot forward, which gives her a score of 4.5 out of 5 for agency. For likability, we're also going to give her a 4 out of 5, because everyone, even the villain, is in love with her, and the audience is supposed to like her too. There is a certain subset of characters, both in film and in the real world, who take issue with her being a strong female character, and those people aren't going to like her, so we are going to take away 1 point for that. Just trying to keep things fair and balanced. But looking at what positive values she promotes, she's going to score really high on this because not only are they just passively part of her character, they're actively who she is. And these are things like promoting social justice, being selfless, like we see in the example where she gives her song God Help the Outcast. She in herself is essentially on house arrest in the cathedral, and prior to that she's been living on the streets. But when she comes time to ask God, who she is more or less agnostic about, for help, she doesn't ask for anything for herself. She asks for help for her people, who in the film are called gypsies, but nowadays we use the correct term Roma. She asks for help for them. She asks for help for other people who are helpless. She asks for help for the outcast, the people who have nothing. And that really speaks to her character. She isn't just doing it when people are watching, like the big spectacle at the Feast of Fools. She's this way in private. She's also uncommonly kind, and that's something that Quasimodo picks up on right away, and is something that he's very enamored with her about, and is something that people should try to emulate more in everyday society. So for positive values, we're giving her a 5 out of 5. As far as anything negative that could be taken away, aside from her being a person of color and being voiced by Demi Moore, who is not, they do hypersexualize her character, and it is intended to be a negative for her. It's one of the reasons that she gets noted on Frollo's radar. He becomes super creepy towards her and obsessed with her because of her sexualization. Now, I personally don't find any problem with women enjoying their sexuality. Anyone should enjoy their sexuality and be comfortable presenting how they want. But we are taking away just a single point because it's intended to be negative by Disney. So, taking all of these into consideration, her overall score is 12.5 out of 15, which is one of the highest scores we're going to see today. Alright, moving on to our next Disney character is actually going to be a Disney princess, and we're going to be looking at Anna from Disney's Frozen. Now, as far as the agency score goes, we're going to give Anna a 3.5 out of 5. She and Elsa kind of share this protagonist type role, as the story is split into Anna's journey and Elsa's journey, so she doesn't get the full points for being the protagonist, but in her storyline, she does drive all of the action. All of the decisions she decides to make are hers from the point of the ball forward. Likability, we're going to go ahead and give her another 3.5 out of 5. She does come off as annoying and naive to a lot of the characters within Arendelle, and is supposed to be portrayed that way towards the audience, but she is supposed to be, like, adorkable. With regards to values, she's another character who actively seeks to portraying these values on screen, as opposed to being more passive like we see in Cinderella. And so these things, again, are going to be perseverance. No matter how many times Elsa shuts her out, no matter how many times other characters try to tell her she can't do something, she perseveres and continues going forward and ends up saving the day at the end of the film. Another positive quality that she portrays is acceptance. She loves Anna as her sister, and when it's revealed that Anna has these powers that everyone else is instantly fearful of, she doesn't even bat an eye. She's like, no, that's my sister, ride or die, I love her, we'll figure it out. So this love and acceptance and perseverance are all wonderful qualities that everyone should emulate, and really give her a high score of 4 out of 5 for positive values emulated by a potential role model character. As far as negatives go, we are going to deduct a couple points because she is dangerously naive, not just cutely adorkable naive. She literally causes the major conflicts in the story with regards to the prince. She instantly tries to marry a man we just met, which, as we've established, is a negative with regards to looking at our Cinderella example. And trying to marry this man she just met, she puts him in charge of the castle while she runs off to go save her sister, and he instantly tries to overthrow Anna and her sister and then eventually kill them. So this dangerous naivety is going to deduct a few points, which gives our character Anna an overall score of 9 out of 15, which is still really high and meets our threshold of at least 8 points. Okay. Our next character is also another Disney princess, and this one is going to be Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Now, when looking at Belle from Beauty and the Beast, I'm going to be focusing on the early 90s animated version, not the remake live action with Emma Watson, because the two characters are very different in how they're portrayed. So looking at the animated Disney Princess Belle, with regards to agency, we're going to go ahead and give her a 2 out of 5. She does have a very independent personality, but a lot of the choices in her life and in her story are not the result of her being able to make her own decisions. She's living at home with her father, and then she spends the majority of the film as a captive. So not a lot of independence, not a lot of agency going on there. She does accrue more and more agency throughout the film, but she doesn't have that full agency that we see other characters have or would maybe want for her. With regards to likability, she's going to score really high on this because the audience is very much supposed to like her. And even though the town thinks she's a weirdo with, she's a funny girl, that Belle in the opening song, they all still very much care for her. And when Gaston reveals that she's been taken by the Beast, the town gets up in arms about it. So we're going to give her a 4 out of 5 for that. And with regards to what positive values she emulates, we do see that these are, again, as you see with a lot more of the classic Disney princesses, are more presented passively than actively, as we see for characters like Anna and Esmeralda. Belle emulates patience and kindness and being non-judgmental, which are all wonderful things that you should incorporate into your own life, which are what make her a potential role model, but they're not actively portrayed in her character. They're not things that she is outwardly doing, they're just sort of passively part of who she is. But these are very important characteristics to have, and she was sort of the character that kicked off the Disney Renaissance and the more independent female Disney characters, so we're going to give her a 4 out of 5 for that. With regards to potential negatives, there is of course the highly debated, does she have Stockholm Syndrome or not? And so we're just going to leave this as a debatable negative. We are going to take away a couple of points, but if you want more information on does Belle have Stockholm Syndrome? Again, Lindsay Ellis has a wonderful video about that, which you can see in the comment description down below. But with regards to how does Belle score on our scale, we're going to give her an 8 out of 5, so making her a borderline role model. Alright, our next candidate is going to be Princess Tiana from Disney's Princess and the Frog. So for agency, she's going to go ahead and do pretty well on this, getting 4 out of 5, as she is the protagonist, and she is very much in charge of her own life, even after she gets turned into a frog. During her journey with Prince Naveen and the other characters, she's very much involved at every step in the decision-making process for her. With regards to likability, she's not going to do as well as some of our other characters because while she does promote positive values, she does it to a fault, and that's her biggest problem throughout her character development in her story, is that she's very hardworking and she's very determined to reach her goals to the point where she neglects her friends and family. And so they don't really like her, and neither does the audience, as much as we maybe should. I just mentioned some of the positive attributes that she expresses in the show, and they are very much a part of what drives the plot forward. So she is one of these more active characters with regards to what positive values they emulate. But she isn't going to get as high as maybe she could because, again, she promotes things like being hardworking and perseverance and values towards family to the point where she doesn't actually really get to value them. They're becoming problematic. She's not being able to utilize them in a way that would be beneficial to her until the very end of the film. So looking at that, we're going to give her a 4 out of 5 for agency, a 3 out of 5 for likability, and a 3 out of 5 for values. And I've already mentioned this a couple of times when talking about different aspects of her character, but a negative that would kind of detract from a higher score for her would be that she doesn't really make these positive changes and really shine through with the values that she promotes throughout the film until the very end. So looking at that, we're going to get a total score for her of 9 out of 15, which is still pretty good compared to our other characters. Our next character that we're going to be looking at to see for a good Disney female role model is going to be Merida from Disney's Brave. Now, with regards to agency, Merida's going to score pretty high as she's the protagonist of the film, and make sure that even when she normally wouldn't, as a Disney princess, have agency in certain scenarios, she goes ahead and forces her way into it. So for that, we're going to give her a 4.5 out of 5. As far as likability goes, she's not going to score as high as maybe she should, and I really do love this character. So me personally, I would give her a 5 out of 5, but trying to remain objective, we're going to go with 3 out of 5 because she does come across as combative with a lot of the other characters that aren't her father or her brothers. Now, this could be taken as sort of Disney trying to portray that feisty, Scottish, Celtic stereotype that you see a lot, but it does become problematic for her as her story progresses. So for that, she's only going to get a 3 out of 5. With regards to what positive values does she promote, she's again one of these active characters where she's very much promoting self-advocacy, in that when it comes time for her to choose a husband, or for, if you've seen the movie, it's the husbands are competing, the princes are competing for who gets to be her husband. She doesn't really necessarily get to choose. She very much stands up for herself and says, no, I don't accept this. And that's really the inciting incident for the movie. Another positive value that we see Merida portray in her film is self-responsibility. Now, throughout the course of the film, she does make some decisions which have very negative consequences, like, turning her mom into a bear. But rather than relying on a fairy godmother or some sort of outside help, she very much takes personal responsibility for her actions, admits that she screws up, and tries everything in her power to rectify the situation. Which, while you probably shouldn't turn your mom into a bear in the first place, being able to admit that you were wrong and take steps to correct it is something that we really need to see more of in this world. So I give her a lot of props for that. So for positive values, she's going to score pretty high, a 4 out of 5. Now, her negatives are going to be something that take down her overall score a little bit more than we would see for maybe Esmeralda. So for this, we would see something like, turning your mom into a bear and being overly selfish, not just about not wanting to get married, but in her overall life, are things that really cause problems for her and her family. So taking that into account, we're going to give Merida an 8.5 out of 15, which is alright. She's over the 8-point minimum to be considered as a role model. And no ranking of Disney female role models would be complete without including Disney's Mulan. While Mulan isn't an actual princess, she does qualify as a Disney princess, and for more information on what Disney considers princess material, check out the Super Carlin Brothers video in the description down below. Now, looking at Mulan as a potential female role model, she does have quite a bit of agency throughout the film, as the film is self-titled after her, and all of the plot is driven by decisions that she makes about her own life. So for that, we're going to give her a 4.5 out of 5. With regards to likability, she's only going to get a 3 out of 5 because within her story, the characters really only like her when she's a man. The character Mulan, as the female character, not as Ping, isn't really liked all that much and is somewhat of an odd duckling. But with regards to values that she portrays in the film, we see a lot of gender equality, where she's trying to do anything that a man could do. She actually excels better in trading when she accepts who she is and uses her strengths that are not maybe traditional masculine strengths to succeed in her military training. She, as being both male and female and more or less going back and forth between the two, sometimes holds a somewhat non-binary icon status, so she gets bonus points for that. She's also very resourceful and is her own person, so she very much relies on her individuality and her identity, and loving for yourself for who you are is something that she struggles with and ultimately comes to realize is something that she needs to value at the end of the film. And these are all things that people in the real world struggle with, and being able to see that you can struggle with these things and then come through and shine on your own is something that we can all really look up to. So, looking at all that, Mulan seems like she's going to be making pretty high score on the role model scale. Now, looking at negatives, while there's nothing inherently negative about being a male, the fact that we're looking at a feminist icon and that the characters only value her opinion when she's a male, but for the very end of the film, when she has to perform these massive feats of heroism to even be considered, that is going to be something that we're going to look at as a negative. That her values and opinions only matter in her story when she's a male. So looking at all of that, Mulan is going to score an 8.5 out of 15, which is still really good, and she's still up there as a potential Disney role model, but she could be better. Hopefully the live-action remake is going to shine through for her. Alright, and the last character we're going to look at before we use our same scale on Yzma is going to be Moana from Disney's self-titled Moana. Again, having the film titled after yourself very much makes you the protagonist, so she's going to score pretty high on the agency scale. Now, she's not scoring as high as she could because a lot of the action and setup for her life is dictated by others. Her status as the daughter of the chief and her role in the community, and even her journeying into the ocean to go find Maui and restore the heart of Te Fiti and all of that is very much other people's decisions. The ocean, her grandmothers, her parents, etc. So as far as agency goes, once she's on her own journey, she does very much take charge and make her own decisions, but because a lot of the decisions in setup for this journey are not her own independent choices, we're gonna give her a 3.5 out of 5. With regards to likability, she's also not gonna score as highly as I maybe want to, despite loving her so much. We're gonna give her a 4 because she is a very strong and independent person, and everyone on the island loves her, but Maui finds her a little bit annoying because she is just a kid. So for that, we're gonna give her a 4 out of 5. With regards to what positive values Moana portrays on screen, we actually have quite a plethora to deal with. She is very much an advocate for justice, pushing Maui, even though he doesn't want to restore the heart of Te Fiti to save her people. She employs independence, as crossing the ocean on her own is a very daunting task. She's not afraid of Maui, who's a demigod, and could easily dispose of her if he wanted to. And he does try to get rid of her on multiple occasions, but she just simply refuses to be said no to. So she very much promotes perseverance, which is something that we see in a lot of our other previously listed Disney role model candidates. She also very much values community and leadership. She wants to do a good job when she eventually replaces her father as the leader of her people. And she very much values the sense of community that she has on the island. And these are the things, in addition to being supported by her grandmother and being selected by the ocean, or what drive her to go find Maui and restore the heart. The only really negative thing I have to say about Moana is not about her the person, but more or less her the movie. And that has to do with, once she completes her hero's journey and returns home, that's kind of it for her. All of the values and things that we see her portray on screen are kind of irrelevant. She just goes back into her life as it was at the beginning of the movie, back into her routine. Now, there is a change that her people once again become explorers and she gets to lead that. But other than that, the biggest resolution was restoring the heart, and after that she doesn't really have anything else to do other than go back into her role as daughter of the chief. So that not really being a character negative, but more I guess of a storytelling negative, and I'm okay with that being a storytelling negative, that her story has closure, which means we're probably not going to see a Moana 2. That's really nothing that we want to take a lot of points away for, but it is something I do want to note, that all of this doesn't really lead to something bigger other than the conclusion of her story. So for that, we're going to take away 1 point, which gives Moana a score of 11.5 out of 5, which really puts her up more towards the top of our rankings. And now let's see how Yzma compares. Alright guys, thanks for sticking with me. I know this has been a longer video, and now we're going to see how Yzma compares using our ranking scale against the other characters that we've talked about so far. So let's look at Yzma and her source of agency. Looking at Yzma, even though she's not explicitly named as the protagonist of the show, is very much the driving force behind the plot. All of Kuzco's adventures and everything that happens in the film is happening because of Yzma's choices. Kuzco's selfishness and poor choices in the beginning of the film are the result of Yzma's upbringing of him. Kuzco turning into a llama and having to go on the run is the result of her trying to get rid of him when he fires her, and so on and so forth. So for that, we're going to give her a 5 out of 5. She's not the named protagonist, but she's very much the protagonist of the show, and every decision that gets made is done by her choice. Now, likability, as a villain, she's really not going to do that great. I love her, and I love her portrayal with Eartha Kitt, and the fact that she's a style icon and super sassy. I love it. And so the audience is supposed to find her an entertaining villain, but the other characters in the show are ambivalent to negative about her. So for that, she's only going to get a 2.5 out of 5. And now, looking at what positive values does she portray on screen. This is going to be somewhat abbreviated since we already talked a lot about it when making the case for why we should even consider her, but these are going to be things like body positivity. Despite the fact that everybody always makes fun of her for being really old or being gross looking, she doesn't see it that way at all. Not only does she not give them any acknowledgement that their negative comments have any validity, but when she talks about herself, she always talks about her beautiful self, which is really important. Not just outer beauty being important, but inner beauty is always important. But being comfortable in your own skin is something that a lot of women have to deal with and have trouble doing. So seeing a character who is so actively put down throughout the course of the film, not have it phase her at all, really stood out to me. In addition to promoting body positivity, we've also mentioned that she's Disney's first woman in STEM, which is always a positive, and we've also established that she has excellent leadership skills in the evidence of the empire being a booming economy and being politically well placed within the rest of the world that they live in. We also see in the way that people treat her that she's not a doormat. When they do try to put her down, she refuses to accept it and pushes forward. We also see a significant difference in the way that she treats the people around her as opposed to Kuzco. So Kuzco we see in the opening sequence that he's very much stepping on all of his castle servants and other people who work underneath him, whereas with Yzma we don't see the same treatment. Yzma does, yes, treat them as subordinates, but there are some very distinctive differences. As I mentioned, she sort of takes a Gordon Ramsay approach to it, where she has very low tolerance for stupidity and incompetence when it comes to Kronk, but when it comes to the other more general employees that work in the palace, we see her treat them very differently, as shown in the clip coming up. Now, watching the I've been turned into a cow bit as a kid, I always thought was very funny, and watching it as an adult, it really stuck with me, having worked in the service industry. I remember working in a restaurant one day, and this was a very large chain restaurant. There was one day where I was working where I not only ripped my pants and then had to ask permission to go across the street to the local store and buy a new pair, and I really had to fight to get a new pair of pants, and the rip was so bad that you could see all the way up the inseam and see my underwear. So it wasn't like I was something that could be, you know, easily covered up and keep going. Never mind that you shouldn't have to work in ripped pants to begin with, no matter how big or small the rip is. Not only did I rip my pants, but during that same shift, I set my hair on fire. The whole restaurant smelled like burnt hair, customers were complaining, and I wanted to just die. So, having an experience like that, I asked my boss if I could go home, and they said no. It wasn't that we were so busy that they couldn't just let me go, they just really wanted me to work that whole shift. So, having worked for a place where I both ripped my pants and set my hair on fire on the same shift and had to stay and work, watching Yzma send someone home just because they'd been turning to a cow, which didn't bother anyone else on that working group, really made me want to work for Yzma and less for my old boss. Now, positive values like being an effective leader, being empathetic towards your employees, and being a fashion icon, let alone a woman in STEM, are all wonderful things that come across for Yzma on screen. But I would be remiss in my duties as being an objective observer if I didn't focus on the negatives. And the biggest negative for her is her homicidal tendencies. So we're gonna deduct some significant points for that. Let's call it 4 points, which means that we have a total final score for Yzma at 8.5 out of 15. So she just barely breaches the 8-point threshold that we've held for being considered a candidate as a female role model as a Disney character. So I think I've made my case. Do you guys agree or disagree? Am I way off base here? Is Yzma not a good role model? Is there anyone that I missed when giving our rankings? Let me know in the comment section down below. Alright guys, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for sticking all the way to the end. Please let me know what you thought in the comment section down below. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. Ring that notification bell so you know when every time I put out a new video. And be sure to follow me on Patreon and become a patron there so that way you can support more content like this. Thanks so much guys, and I'll see you next time. Mwah!